with our friends, just so many aspects of our life are all going on this network. And we've spent immense amounts of money to build it and build all the handheld devices and the computers, all the software. But what has the government done and what has big business done? They've turned it into the world's greatest surveillance apparatus, a surveillance apparatus that even George Orwell probably wouldn't have dreamed of. And that wasn't why we built it. We didn't make it to be a surveillance apparatus. But unfortunately, we've learned, thanks to Edward Snowden, who has revealed what the NSA has been doing, that the NSA and other spy agencies around the world are doing this. They're making it a surveillance apparatus. They're tracking all of the phone calls you make in terms of the records and where you were and who you talked to, and in many cases recording the actual voice. They are, because they say they need to find a needle in a haystack, looking at the entire haystack. They're looking at everything innocent people do in order to find guilty people. And nobody thinks that we shouldn't have police and intelligence agents whose job it is to find bad guys and stop bad guys. That's not a question. But a free society makes a decision for itself. It makes a decision to limit the power of its police and its intelligence agents. It makes a decision to let some bad things happen, to let some guilty people get away in order to avoid punishing innocent people, doing surveillance on people who are innocent and there's no reason to suspect them. But unfortunately, that's not what happens. And unfortunately, Mr. Snowden has shown us just the depth to which it's going on. And that's the biggest challenge we're facing, how to make societies realize that we do need our privacy and we do need to limit the power of these organizations. We do need to draw a line somewhere. And more than draw a line, we need to make people think there's not necessarily some trade-off between privacy and security. That it's possible sometimes to keep your rights and gain security at the same time. It's just harder. The easy thing to do is just make everyone give up their rights. So that's one of the biggest challenges going forward. Now, we also have challenges in free speech. We're seeing more and more countries around the world trying to censor their internets, trying to censor what people do, getting as extreme as Hosni Mubarak shutting off the internet when a revolution was coming. And, you may think, oh, well, that's Egypt. But in fact, just before that, President Obama had asked for an ability to have a kill switch for the internet. Now, not, of course, during a revolution. He said, if we're being attacked or something and we need to shut it off, we would like to have that. So we're seeing people as well self-censor. Disturbingly, because of the Snowden revelations, we're seeing the press afraid of what might happen to them if they report these stories and starting to censor themselves, and that's affecting free speech. We're also seeing a big effort for people to take control of our computers and have them do things that we necessarily don't want them to do, all in the service of protecting a movie when you download it so that you can't easily copy it to someone else, which has never worked. It's never actually stopped people from copying movies. But we have a lot of forces pushing for laws and technology to basically lock down your computer, not so that you can trust it, but so that movie studios and governments and so on can trust that you can't do things on it. And that is something that computer engineers all know is never going to work and is just going to make things broken.
Just when you thought it was safe to put on your headphones, you entered the darkest, wildest, sexiest depths of technology. And here to keep you on the bleeding edge of science, tech, and ethics is the Rated R radio star, the man of tomorrow, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
All right, listen. This is going to be an episode where, the man of tomorrow, the golden stallion, says a whole lot. He says, who's crazy now, motherfucker? Oh, yeah. Because Vault 7 is proving sovereign tech, left and right, up and down, and all around, the big bad town. Mr. DeVille, hey, Mr. DeVille. I am ready for my close-up, baby, because I'm going to call it like I see it. And I'm telling you, this episode's going to be a little bit different. Because, no, we're not going to start it off with the foreplay. We'll do that later. Sorry, no lube. We're going to go right in to what was announced this week. But I got to tell you, maybe the best thing to come out of this whole thing with WikiLeaks Vault 7 happened on Tuesday is that Finally, you are hearing, much like you just heard, and of course that was from 2014, the audio you heard at the beginning of this episode, that was Brad Templeton on Big Think, where Brad Templeton, of course, who was a chair at the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, also now is a chair at Singularity University, was talking about things where really everybody is starting to say, holy shit, what is government doing? But that is a far too simple conclusion to come up with here, because, well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag early, but I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't believe that WikiLeaks are the good guys. I don't. And we're going to talk more about that as we break into this story. And like I said, we're just going to get right into it. We're not going to waste any time. The segments, we're going to take as much time as we need to cover this, because there's a lot of FUD. There's a lot of bullshit going around, and frankly, that bullshit going around, it's not the mainstream media. WikiLeaks is complicit themselves in spreading a lot of crap about this. And so the Golden Stallions got to mop it all up. It's unbelievable. The reactions I was seeing this week from this, the headlines, the tweets from WikiLeaks themselves were, just positively ridiculous. And anybody that, we talked recently, we had an episode of Sovryn Tech called Internet Self-Defense, maybe a month ago. And I said, look, you want to read this stuff for yourself as much as you can. And look, you don't have to read hard either. You don't have to be a security expert. Okay. You don't have to have a CEH or something to really understand a lot of what was in, these 8,000 documents, that came out this week. You could just as simply as any other journalist did, hit Control F perhaps on your web browser, looking at the PDFs of this stuff, or however you're looking at it, and do searches for terms. This is what you could have done, okay? And like I said, we're going to really break down what exactly Vault 7 is. I'll just say quickly, yes, March 7th, 2017, HE, there was, WikiLeaks released some odd 8,000 classified documents from the CIA. Okay, part of this was called Year Zero. We'll break up, we'll read a little bit of their press release in just a moment. But I just want to say that a lot of the claims that you heard, we're going to talk about Signal, we're going to talk about WhatsApp, we're going to talk about Telegram, we're going to talk about Samsung TVs, we're going to talk about, Windows computers. We're going to talk about all this different stuff. Okay. But here's the interesting thing is that a lot of the tweets, a lot of the claims, a lot of the stuff that was, said to be broken or hacked or cracked or whatever. Okay. If you actually type those words in, like if you typed in Signal or something like this, into say a search within these 8,000 some odd documents, from here on forward, I'll just say the 8,000 documents. How about that? You'd find there's no mention of Signal whatsoever. There's no mention of WhatsApp, as far as I know. There's no mention of a lot of these things that were being sensationalized throughout the week as being, cracked or broken and foolhardy to use. And, the sky is falling. Oh, forget everything. Encryption is dead. Privacy is dead. We're all screwed. When none of that is true. None of it is true. And we're going to break it all down. Okay. Like I said, if it takes me an hour, if it takes me an hour and a half, I'll push every goddamn story I had ready for this week. Okay. Because I'm going to make sure that you walk away from this episode with what exactly is going on, some theories as to perhaps what's the reality around it, who to trust, perhaps who not to trust, and of course, solutions for all of it. Okay. I want this to be a total package for you to understand. All right. Now, if I sound a little hot and bothered, if I sound a little hot around the collar, okay, it is because I saw so much BS getting shared around, and some of it from people that, in my opinion, should know better, and they didn't. But anyway, fortunately, there were some journalists out there, some tech journalists, Ian Thompson, some others I can think of, who Ian Thompson's just a great guy at the Register, and some others that were very quick to say, whoa, this is not as bad as anybody is thinking. I'll give you one quick example, because a lot of this is going to break down to the fact that, mobile operating systems and, of course, some desktop operating systems, have some very serious security exploits that the CIA was taking advantage of, it appears, right? Okay. Well, one of the things that you find out, again, if you do a little bit of a search and if, you break it down a little bit more, you find out that all of the, like, say with Android, the Android exploits that were listed off only affected Android version 4.4 and below. We're on Android 7.0 now, almost to 7.1. Okay, so this is, there's important things to take away from this. We're going to get into that. But I'm just saying that understand that a lot of what you think you've been told about all this misses every ounce of nuance and misses, it missed out on a whole lot of critical thinking. So anyway, let's do this. Let's get into this. Like I said, we'll take all the time we need with this to make sure that people understand what's going on, because I was downright depressed at hearing people thinking that, look, the jig is up. We can't hide anything from the government anymore. We might as well forget about our privacy. No. Never have that defeatist attitude. Okay. Never, ever have that, because there's, in fact, really, well, again, we'll break into it. Let's read the press release. Let's do this. So this is coming right from WikiLeaks.org. Of course, there are links for everything I'm talking about in the show notes for episode 216. Just go to sovereigntech.com and you can find it, and you can read it all for yourself, like I recommend doing. You don't even have to take my word for it. All right. Even though I was honored that a lot of people, as soon as this happened on Tuesday, I had a lot of people on social media saying, Golden Stallion, what the hell's going on? We can't wait for this week's Sovereign Tech. Well, here it is. So anyway, all right. Right from WikiLeaks.org here, the press release today, Tuesday, March 7th, 2017, WikiLeaks begins its new series of leaks on the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, codenamed Vault 7 by WikiLeaks. So Vault 7 is a WikiLeaks attributed name. Okay. It is the largest ever publication of confidential documents on the agency. Now, that statement right out of the gate may not be inherently true. There are other, there have been larger leaks of this nature, but it's definitely one of the biggest ones, no question there. But, no need to critique them on that, even though that's just kind of a bit of marketing on their part, which is part of the problem with this whole thing. But anyway, the first full part of the series, Year Zero, comprises 8,761 documents and files from an isolated, high-security network situated inside the CIA Center for Cyber Intelligence in Langley, Virginia. They spelled Virginia wrong. It follows an introductory disclosure last month of CIA targeting French political parties and candidates in the lead-up to the 2012 presidential election. So let's stop here for a second. Stallion breaking in. Okay. Understand that this is just part one of this apparent larger amount of leaks that WikiLeaks is going to be putting out. Year Zero is just the first part. So there may be more coming down the line, which would make some degree of sense, because a lot of these leaks are, frankly, years old, which would explain why they were talking so much about, like in particular with Android, why they were talking about Android 4.4. Instead of Android, 5.0 or 6.0, or now, like I said, we're at Nougat, 7.0. So keep that in mind. And I know, I'll address this quickly. I know a lot of people are going to say, and this may, what's going to come out of these other, what is it? Is the next one going to be called Year One? Are we going to end up with 7 years with Vault 7? Is that what the 7 means? What is all that about? I don't know how they're going to what the nomenclature is going to be after Year Zero. But are we going to find out future things as this goes on? Like, is the next leak going to address Android 5.0, let's say, or whatever? Or is it going to address this? What's that going to look like? Maybe that's what it's going to end up doing. And maybe everything that I say about the Year Zero leaks in particular, okay, I'll put this right out there, may end up getting proven wrong based upon, future releases that might, because this is when the Snowden leaks happened, right? Back in 2013? When the Snowden leaks occurred, this is exactly, how The Guardian was releasing things. Is The Guardian would, they would put out, so many documents on one day, and then they'd let the NSA react, and then they'd release documents later that made the NSA look like idiots by proving that everything they said, just a day before was a lie. Okay, so is that kind of the plan here? I don't think so. And I'm going to give you my overarching theory as to why exactly these were released in the first place later on in this episode. But first, we need to address what exactly was laid out here. So, but yes, we do expect more. And honestly, I have not had the time. Look, I might as well get this out of the way early. Obviously, I have not read all 8,761 documents or looked at all the files and everything, that are in this release, that are in this leak. I don't know anybody that's read them all already. And this came out Tuesday, and I'm recording right now on Saturday. It's March 11th. But I did do some keyword searching, certainly, and looked for various things that I thought might be of interest. And, and this is an interesting point. I didn't come up with much with my keyword searches, at least the ones that I think were more critical. So anyway, let's keep on reading here. Recently, the CIA lost control of the majority of its hacking arsenal, including malware, viruses, trojans, weaponized zero-day exploits, malware remote control systems, and associated documentation. The extraordinary collection, which amounts to more than several hundred million lines of code, gives its possessor the entire hacking capacity of the CIA. The archive appears to have been circulated among former U.S. government hackers and contractors in an unauthorized manner, one of whom has provided WikiLeaks with portions of the archive. Year Zero introduces the scope and direction of the CIA's global covert hacking program, its malware arsenal, and dozens of zero-day weaponized exploits against a wide range of U.S. and European company products, including Apple's iPhone, Google's Android, and Microsoft's Windows, and even Samsung TVs, which are turned into covert microphones. I'll read just a little bit more here. And if you're wondering, yes, I am on location. I'm coming from Ice Planet Zero, but I am on location. So if the audio quality is a little different than when I'm in the studio, it's because I'm on my trusty Blue Yeti at the moment. But anyway, let's continue on. Since 2001, the CIA has gained political and budgetary preeminence over the U.S. National Security Agency, of course, the NSA. The CIA found itself building not just its now infamous drone fleet, but a very different type of covert globe-spanning force, its own substantial fleet of hackers. The agency's hacking division freed it from having to disclose its often controversial operations to the NSA, its primary bureaucratic rival, in order to draw on the NSA's hacking capacities. By the end of 2016, the CIA's hacking division, which formally falls under the agency's Center for Cyber Intelligence, had over 5,000 registered users and had produced more than 1,000 hacking systems, trojans, viruses, and other weaponized malware. Such is the scale of the CIA's undertaking that by 2016, its hackers had utilized more code than that used to run Facebook. The CIA had created, in effect, its own NSA, with even less accountability and without publicly answering the question as to whether such a massive budgetary spend on duplicating the capabilities of a rival agency could be justified. Okay, so let's break that down. And really that answers the whole thing, is that the CIA effectively created their own NSA. Now, the CIA is chartered to deal with foreign operations, but in so dealing with foreign operations, they're like, well, but wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to, work with the NSA so much, and we just kind of built our own little domestic policy with our own little NSA, and that's what Vault 7 is laying out. Is this entire, their own personal little U.S. domestic spy program, within the CIA. So you're finding out here a couple interesting things, but you're finding out that, all right, so it's not just the NSA watching you. I mean, you figured they were all working together anyway, right? Well, there, that raises some interesting points in and of itself. Is that, are there really like competing groups within the U.S. government itself? And it's certainly, to get into the realm of conspiracy and speculation, because I don't have a whole ton of evidence for this, other than this does seem to point at it. Because, look, if the CIA and the NSA got along fine and had this, great rapport, why the fuck would you create your own NSA, within the CIA? You wouldn't. You wouldn't need to. It'd be a waste of resources, because to do this stuff, and we're going to get into this later, to do all this stuff is fucking expensive. Okay? So, why do that? And it would seem because, well, maybe different alphabet soup organizations are working for different teams. And that poses some very interesting points, which, and again, like I said, or where I was going to go in the conspiracy, realm, I know so many people talk about, oh, it's the globalist agenda, it's the elites, they're doing it, blah, 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 new world order, blah, 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 all this crap, right? And it is crap. But, and I say it's crap because I've never, ever believed that there is such a thing as a singular new world order. Do I think that there's a multitude of groups of, say, secret groups that are, playing a little, little cloak and dagger against each other that, doesn't make it into the news? Fuck yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, granted, that's somewhat in the realm of speculation, but I think there's a lot of evidence, really to point at that. And this is just another, piece to that puzzle. There probably are, a multitude of groups, going after each other. There isn't like this one singular new world order. That's just fucking nonsense. Okay, you get 5 people together and you try to get them to even agree to do anything. How the hell are you going to do it? With the amount of people it would take to do that kind of nonsense. So anyway, let's break into what exactly was talked about. You got the press release here. That's exactly what's going down. What WikiLeaks released, and in many ways, this beginning of the press release, okay, before they even get into their analysis, that's where things start falling apart. Their initial press release, all right, fine, this is what you're releasing, this is what's out there, I get it, I see it, yes, you relatively, accurately described what is in these documents and files. But then once they get into their analysis and once they get into their very sensationalized tweets, that's where WikiLeaks start to fall apart. But it's not the only place that WikiLeaks falls apart. But first, like I said, let's get into the tech. What exactly are they talking about? What did we find out from year 0? What is going on? This is, well, we'll do the full breakdown because there's a lot of different aspects that were covered. Like they said, Android, iOS, Windows, even OS, or it should be called Mac OS now, even Mac OS, along with Samsung TVs. I mean, there's a whole slew of things here, that have been affected. So why don't we start off? Let's start off with talking about Windows. Okay, I know I have a lot of Windows users here, and this one might not be the meatiest of the bunch. I think that what most people are wanting to find out about is, is Signal broken? Okay, well, I'll tell you right now, it's not. We'll talk more about it in just a few minutes. So starting off with Windows. The CIA's Umbrage team has a modest collection of attack tools for systems powered by Microsoft's, by Windows. There's a link in the show notes where you can check some of this stuff out that lists off all of the different tools, that were revealed with year 0 here, or with Vault 7, I guess I should say. The tools include keystroke loggers, sandbox escape ropes, antivirus avoidance mechanisms, which, let me get that right out of the gate. I've been telling you for years, don't bother with an antivirus. It actually creates more more exploits. It creates more gateways to get into your system. And really, Vault 7 proved this. When you look over how they get around antivirus software, I mean, you just see just how antivirus is more trouble. It creates more security problems than it solves. All right, we've talked about that recently on episodes of Sovryn Tech 2, where you find out just how much antivirus software has really held up the development of, new technologies within the PC industry itself. Okay, so this just proves that point a little bit more. CIA analysts found flaws in Control Panel, that's Windows Control Panel, and the ability to add data streams to NTFS. Of course, NTFS is the, that's the hardware, the hard drive, formatting system that Windows, really pioneered. This was back in the, mid-90s with Windows NT. NTFS, I mean, people are getting away from NTFS anyway. I want to touch on this quickly. So their ability to get, to add stuff within NTFS, that really screws the pooch. That screws the computer. Like, that's bad. If you can just inject. I mean, there was a story earlier in 2016 where we talked about, it was Eugene Kaspersky of Kaspersky, speaking of antivirus software, where he came out and said, look, the NSA has tools that can just rewrite the firmware on your hard drive. And once they can do that, I mean, it's fucking game over. And yeah, understood. But let's keep in mind that to do all of this, everything we're talking about, okay, this is going to be one of the primary points in this whole scheme, is that it's expensive to do. And so the bulk of us likely are not walking around with this shit injected on our various devices, okay, regardless of the practicality of what they're doing. Okay, but, even looking at the code, including with this, NTFS injection, okay, even looking at the code of it and or not the code necessarily, but the way that they did it, kind of their setup based upon what we know of how they do it, like, this is really ugly shit. Like, this grand hacking team that WikiLeaks is talking about, that the CIA has, let's be clear here. They suck compared to, what the rest of private industry has. Like, I mean, these guys are, the shit's so rudimentary. It's so basic. It's clever, but it's only really clever because it wasn't reported. Like, it's not like they really figured out anything grand. And in fact, just putting this out there, okay, I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA didn't really discover these 0 days on their own. I think they probably hired, well, unfortunately, they probably hired people like Kevin Mitnick with his industry, and all these different companies around the world, quote unquote security companies that sell 0 days to governments. The CIA just bought them up. It's not like the CIA had the fucking brains, to figure out how all this stuff works, because I don't think they do, just based upon their own documents that we have here. I mean, it's like, if I were to compare the CIA, okay, to the people that work, largely, say, in New Zealand, Silicon Valley, or Switzerland, or something like that. I mean, this, compared to the adults and the very mature, coders, hackers, security professionals that work in all of those areas, frankly, what the CIA has, I think it's like a bunch of third graders with, with the head for numbers and an Etch-a-Sketch. That's about it. I mean, it's weak shit. So anyway. So NTFS is a thing. I wanted to address that quickly. So most operating systems are going away from NTFS. exFAT that's EXFAT, is now kind of the order of the day for some people, even though macOS recently, and of course if you use BSD, which is one of my favorite operating systems, BSD, they use ZFS. Now, there's a problem with that, though. Some versions of BSD will use ZFS. There's a problem with ZFS, and that is that ZFS is not an open source protocol. Or an open source format, I should say. I don't know if that's any better. ZFS is better. Like, it's technically better at what it does. It's an incredible, hard drive format. But, yeah. Well, anyway, NTFS, that being a concern, honestly, it's sort of a dead concern, because NTFS is going the way of the dodo, even within Microsoft itself. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, Microsoft, I think they're already developing a newer format anyway, but even if they if they ended up using ZFS as it was. So let's see. Windows library files are useful stepping stones. They're cracking DLLs and all this, including they were able to use Windows theme files to to do security exploits, which is. So here's the funny thing with that about using Windows theme files, and we're literally just talking about the files that will change the appearance of your Windows machine, right? Okay, I've talked about this many times because it's such a great example. Okay, when you talk about Debian Linux, all right, the programmers, okay, the team, the developers behind Debian Linux, they have massive arguments, and they are funny to read, honestly, when you read on their board systems, okay? They have massive arguments over just adding a wallpaper. Guess what? You think that's ridiculous? No, this is why. Because even through Windows theme files, the CIA was able to crack into systems. That's why Debian Linux, that's why a good hard Linux system takes a good hard look at even a JPEG. You get me? So anyway, let's read on a little bit here with the DLLs. I understand Windows theme files are a little more than a JPEG file, okay? This is, just like, a lot of people don't understand that. Something as simple as fonts, fonts are Turing complete. Do you know that? Oh yeah, woo, Ethereum's Turing complete. Isn't that fucking amazing? No, not really. Not when my Battlestar Galactica font has the same capability. Are you fucking nuts? Anyway, so, all right. Sorry. Sidetrack. DLL files. Those were a very popular thing that was being taken advantage of. Of course, that's Dynamic Link Library. This is the very heart of Windows. So being able to crack those obviously is the most important way to really do a whole lot of damage on somebody's system. So anyway, one of the DLL attacks that they showed, techniques. Someone at the agency is apparently a bit of a Will Ferrell fan. The Ricky Bobby program, as it was called, of course, that's was The Legend of Ricky Bobby. That's a NASCAR comedy film. Talladega Nights. Thank you, lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, producer of Sovryn Tech, breaking in with, of course, the important facts. And named after the character in the film. Well, there it is, Talladega Nights. Uses several .NET DLLs. And of course, the .NET framework is a very important aspect of Windows, and a Windows PowerShell script to implant a listening post on target Windows PCs. A version has been used in the field on USB drives, according to one of the documents. The software with attack tools dubbed Fight Club these are obviously all cinephiles here, as in movie fans, was put onto 6 thumb drives and, quote, inserted into the supply chain of a target network /group, end quote. So this is something, this is going to be a recurring theme as we cover what happened with Vault 7 and what these documents talk about, is that a lot of this is, this is like sneaker net straight injection. It requires somebody to walk up put a USB flash drive key, whatever, into your system. And we'll find out about this too later with the Samsung TVs, that's what it requires. It literally requires SneakerNet. SneakerNet just means that it's something that you have to like walk to, you have to deliver it. It's not done over the internet. Okay. But it's still, a computer, affair. SneakerNet, that's just a thing. It can be good. It can be bad. Obviously in this case, it's bad, but it's just, it's just a slang term. Doing that whole process of just like hiring somebody or having an agent go in or getting an agent in place to where they can, hook up a USB drive to whatever machines are necessary or to whatever network or anything like this, that's expensive. Understand that. That's a really expensive thing to do. And the CIA didn't just suddenly send out a bunch of operatives all around the world or all around, the U.S. in this case, because again, this is more referencing the CIA's domestic policy, okay, within the U.S., you couldn't do that. Like, you don't have enough people. You really couldn't make that work. Okay. So again, as far as like these kinds of attacks, most Windows machines, while yes, they can easily screw Windows machines, that's not up to debate here, aren't infected because it just costs too damn much to do it. Okay. And there's easier ways to go about this. These are critical hits on a system. No doubt about that. Okay. But it's easier, frankly, to just send out emails with ugly links in them that people generally will just click because they don't know better. And I understand that. Okay. I don't mean to insult by saying that, but that's the easier way to go about these things. And so, but if you have a smart email policy in your own head, okay, and hopefully you have a good IT team, say where, at the business you work at or something, or you hire a great security professional like, the Golden Stallion himself, you'll know about this. So again, sky's not falling, folks. Yes, this is bad. This is stuff that Microsoft needs to address, no doubt about it, but it takes a lot more than just, oh shit, everything's broken. It's a lot more than that. There's a lot of nuance here. But let's get into a little bit, while we're talking about servers, talking about IT teams. If you're using Windows Exchange 2010, the CIA has a tool for that, dubbed Shoulder Surfer. This performs a code injection attack against the Exchange Data Store Manager process that would allow an agent to collect emails and contacts at will without the need for an individual's credentials. Exchange 2007 is even easier to crack, according to the CIA. And there's all PDF documents for all this stuff. So understand this, that, yeah, okay, so, the Exchange server, this is a real problem. I think that this is, and that's really it to talk about as far as Windows goes. Look, yeah, Windows is easily crackable, based upon what was laid out in the Vault 7 documents. No question about that. It's easy to crack, by the code, but it's not so easy to just get in there and do the cracking. If you get my point. Like I said, a lot of this has to be done SneakerNet style. Not all, but a lot of the big stuff that people were freaking out about, they don't understand just how difficult it is to get this put onto a computer. Okay. Now, as far as like what's happening with Windows Exchange and all this, now, a lot of this can get addressed, and it can get addressed very quickly. And in fact, Windows 10, its model, the way that it updates and everything, could really address this concern very quickly. And also, now that and this is interesting, I'm not saying that this is the best way to go or it's what I prefer. Honestly, I prefer people don't even use Windows, but I understand why people use Windows. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. Okay. But if, you're on the subscription model now with Office 365, right? Like if you just do that, then, you're not dealing with all these older versions of Exchange Server anyway that, clearly have problems. And this speaks again to the point that understand a lot of what's described in year 0 in Vault 7 here, all right, is really applies to older software that if you're just constantly updating, and I know if stuff auto updates, you could get something from the CIA that way and you don't have a choice about it, or it could break your system or something. If it's forced updates, that can be a bad thing. I know that. Okay, but I'm talking in general about general people because that's largely who this is going to affect. All right, if you're doing that, then if you have that Office 365 subscription, yeah, you're paying a monthly fee, but you're always getting the latest version of Exchange Server and all that. I know that it's tough to just update to Exchange Server, at particularly at larger businesses or even medium-sized businesses, but it really speaks to why you need to be doing that. And there's a chance that Microsoft knew about some of this stuff. Okay. There's the chance that they had an idea. And there's a couple points I want to bring up about this while we're talking about Windows as far as Vault 7 goes. All right. One is that, they're really pushing hard for people to update to Windows 10. And maybe that, and not just out there in, with your average consumer, but maybe, in the enterprise space as well. They're really pushing hard because they know that they can solve this stuff a lot faster if they get everybody in on these kind of, these subscription models, or on these more, rapid update models that come out there. And that's why they're timing them. It's very clear that what's going on with Windows 10, a lot of it, I'm not saying there aren't problems with Windows 10. There's a shit ton. We've talked about them, over the past couple of years. As long as Windows 10's been out there, we've talked about them on Sovryn Tech. I mean, Microsoft themselves does key logging. Okay, forget about the CIA. Microsoft themselves, made it very clear that when you were beta testing, or if you were on like the fast ring or slow ring for Windows 10 for testing, that they were going to collect all the telemetry of what you were doing. But at least they told you, I guess. Again, I don't want to, be here defending Microsoft, but I'm just saying that there's a good chance that they know about this, and that they, this is part of the reason they're pushing really hard to get people on board with that. It could be the opposite, that they, they don't want the CIA to have to do such an expensive job, and they want everybody on board with this stuff because Windows 10 is already fucking, pwned by the CIA or the NSA or something like that. I'm open to that too. But here's the gaffe. Here's the interesting thing. And if it weren't for this one little tidbit of a story, I would be a little more concerned about Windows. Okay. And the little tidbit that I have is, last year, I believe it was, that finally, and this was, it was a small story, not widely reported. I did mention it on Sovryn Tech, but Microsoft actually allowed the EU, yes, the European Union, okay, Starfleet Command, as No Agenda listeners would know, in the morning to you, Starfleet Command, the EU, they allowed the EU to actually look at the closed source kernel code for Windows. So the EU and their quote unquote professionals have had, they've looked at the golden egg, which not many people have had the chance to do. And so when you consider that, the EU, and look, folks, like I said, or I tried to lay out here, and I think that the entire Vault 7 story proves, it's not like all the governments around the world all work together and they're all happy-go-lucky and they're all on the same team and they're all this big new world order. I really don't think that's true. And I think, again, Vault 7 proves it, with this really what seems to be a competition between the CIA and the NSA. Okay, so to allow the EU to get a good look, at the Windows kernel, which, again, like I said, not many people get the chance to do. I think if there was something crazy going on there, things would be very interesting as far as what's going on in the EU. Now, is this why the EU wants certain things not bundled with, with versions of Windows? That's been a story ever since Internet Explorer with Windows XP, right? Used to have Windows N or Windows XP N in Europe because that was the one that didn't come with Internet Explorer bundled in it. Maybe that's what's secretly going on there. I don't know. But my point being is that, well, there have been more eyes than normally looking at, the nitty gritty of what makes up Windows. So I really don't want to say that Microsoft is being 100% complicit, with the U.S. government or with the CIA anyway, and whatever else, especially considering just how, really, what a strong case. And I don't think it's theater because it's not getting enough attention to be theater. The strong case of, Microsoft versus the DOJ that's been going on for the past couple of years as far as that Irish, server that they have in Ireland. Okay. So, yeah. Now, as far as using Windows, okay, let's get into the desktop operating system thing here for a minute because this is kind of important. Okay. As far as using Windows, look, I have said this for so long on Sovryn Tech. I said, I understand, if you want to get stuff done, yeah, you use Windows. In fact, Michael Dean of the Freedom Fiends, he made a great little meme that said it's something it was like a yes or no thing, with a chart with the lines. Well, if you say yes, go here, right? And it said that and I get it. I don't I'm not saying I 100% agree, but I get it. And I thought it was funny and shockingly true. If do you need to get stuff done? If the answer is yes, it takes you to Windows and it takes you to Linux. And if it says no, it takes you to like OS 10 or something. I forget exactly how it worked. But the point being is that, look, if you have a life and you need to get shit done, you use Windows. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And the kind of the alternative point is that if you need to get shit done, but you don't have a life, you can use Linux, right? And so, But my point being is that what I've said for years on Sovryn Tech, look, I get it why people use Windows. It might be a business thing, whatever. You got to use Office. And yes, I know Office works on Mac OS. But, like Windows for me, the only reason that I still use it largely is because of gaming. Windows is the ultimate gaming platform. Look, shut up. Yes, it is. It just is. Okay? Deal with it. It's a fact. And no, virtual machines don't cut it. I get so tired of hearing that argument. I get it all the time. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. You can say by the numbers that it's supposed to do that, but I can show you a lot of numbers where things just don't add up no matter what your math looks like. Okay? VMs don't cut it when it comes to gaming. So not when you're dealing with like the latest and greatest, right? Okay, so what I said was, look, if you really, or even if it's just to run Photoshop, or if it's to run, maybe you got, I don't know, if you got to run Outlook or something, whatever the hell you got to do, okay? Just have a Windows machine, have two computers, all right? You have your one with Linux or BSD if you're feeling that saucy, and then you have one with Windows. The one with Windows, you log into practically nothing with that, okay? And, and you just use it for either for gaming or you use it for Photoshop or whatever the hell you need. All right. And that's it. That's all you do is you have that separate machine just sitting off to the side and that's what you use it for. So not, if people were following largely what I've been saying for some time on Sovryn Tech, none of this would be certainly none of it is a surprise. I mean, everybody's expected that this stuff was going on. Just now, we kind of have the proof of it. Okay. But also, it wouldn't really bother you so much because it's not like your Windows computer would be doing, that much in the first place. But do also understand, look, I get it. Okay. Not everybody's going to buy two machines. And some people, maybe it's not like that critical what you have going on. And, that one Windows machine is good enough for you. Okay. And also, I really do think, and we'll be covering this more as we get into other aspects of Vault 7, okay, that these companies are jumping on top of it. Apple and Google, within like 48 hours, said that, either what was reported out of Vault 7 was either already plugged, is already fixed, or it was, like previously, like it had already been long fixed and it just wasn't a problem anymore, or that they were fixing it and they fixed it right away. So the fixes are in, and I don't mean that in a negative connotation. Okay, as far as this stuff goes. But there you go. If you want to know, what to do about that. Now, I want to touch on this, and maybe this will lead in, nicely. Well, all right, never mind. Actually, I'll save it. I want to talk about what they talked about with Mac OS. Or in the documents, it was, these are slightly older, so it was called OS 10 at the time. It's where now it's called Mac OS. So users of Apple OS 10, have no need to really look smug here. The CIA has tools for them. A lot of hacking tools cover, it was, El Capitan. So the version of, OS 10 that was El Capitan. But presumably those have been updated to subvert new versions of the operating system. And that, that's something to talk about like all the way around is that, yeah, I mean, there might be updated exploits to what's described within these documents. Sure. We're totally open to that, but wait for my overall, idea as to what I think actually, was happening here, because maybe that's not necessarily the case. Let's see. That said, it does seem though, reading files that Apple poses, reading through the files, Apple poses a significantly more difficult challenge for the CIA than the code from Redmond. Of course, analysts note that the operating system can be resilient to applications that try to slip malware onto a Mac, but it's still possible to whitelist spying software, subvert net install images, creating zombie programs, and surreptitiously get at the kernel. One interesting project the files touch on is dubbed Quark Matter. This is a technique for hiding spying software persistently on an OS 10 system by using an EFI driver stored on the EFI system partition. Now, the EFI, of course, is the replacement for BIOS. I mean, almost all computers use an EFI now as compared to BIOS. Reading on, but of course, Mac's been using them for a very long time. Another one dubbed Snowy Owl uses a pthread in an OpenSSH client to potentially pull off remote monitoring of a target system. The documents also show a project called Harpy Eagle that analyzed Apple's Airport Extreme firmware for private keys and also time capsule systems. Okay, so OS 10, Mac OS, what do we get to call it today? Mac OS, a little bit better off. Now, what's the reasoning behind that? Is that because of Apple's sandboxing? or like push towards sandboxing software, right? Getting things through the Mac store, on a Macintosh or, on a MacBook or whatever. Macintoshes really don't exist anymore, do they? But anyway, yeah, I mean, that might be part of it. Is it because it's based largely on BSD code? Certainly. That's a thing. But again, there's still problems, with Mac OS here. So, but I want to talk about the whole desktop thing, and that'll lead us into talking about the mobile operating systems, which is where the bulk of the attention has been on. Okay, and then we'll get into, the Samsung TVs and some other things. So with desktop operating systems, there's kind of this big argument. In fact, Matthew Green, who I have a deep respect for, he's a cryptographer at Johns Hopkins University, had a lot to do with ZeroCoin, which ended up becoming Zcash, which I'm a huge fan of, which you can donate to Sovryn Tech with, by the way. Link is address, shielded and transparent, are in the show notes if you'd like to do that. But Matthew Green, great. I think he has the right attitude on a lot of things, and certainly, a very intelligent cryptographer. He did this write-up where he said that, look, there's a big problem with desktop operating systems that mobile operating systems really don't have. And the problem that desktop operating systems have is that they were designed from the get-go. And this might, like we were talking about how, with the Mac store, which we've talked about for a while, where, you can't just install any software. They want you to go through this, store like you do on a mobile device, like the App Store or, the Google Play Store or something. Okay, but largely operating systems were made for developers. They were made for people to be able to create software that gets at the nitty-gritty of the desktop operating system itself. Okay, so by design, Matthew Green's argument kind of goes, and if I'm putting words in his mouth, I apologize. By design, desktop operating systems are kind of insecure because they're meant to be toyed with at, very deep levels of code. There's a truth to that, okay? But that same thing that creates a potential danger is the same thing that might be its, for lack of a better term, salvation. Because you can get so deep, because you can get, really control what's going on with the operating system, you can fend off things, fend off exploits as much as you can create them. And so I really think we'll talk about the mobile operating systems here in a minute. But I really think that the desktop is kind of, if you're looking for any kind of security, it is your last best hope, as far as security, privacy, anonymity, and all of that. I really don't think you're going to find it in iOS and Android, even though, yes, Android has a Linux code base, but understand, especially over the past few years, Google has taken that over so much. I mean, it's almost a misnomer today to call it Linux, in my opinion. It really is, no matter what the kernel's made of. It's just so different. So, if you want to know, like, okay, so Windows is screwed, looks like Mac OS is a little more screwed, even though Mac OS obviously has some advantages to it. I mean, is the simple answer use Linux? Yeah, kind of. That kind of is. I mean, like I said, I'm going to bake in a whole bunch of solutions, sort of as we go on here. But yeah, I definitely recommend. I mean, and this is nothing new for Sovryn Tech listeners as well. Hell, for years, literally for almost 5 years that this show has been running, I have put in the show notes every single episode. There is a link for a computer. Actually, now there's two different models now, but it's the LibreBoot X200, and then there's the LibreBoot T400. They're from 2009, 2011, something like that. They're your older ThinkPads, Lenovo ThinkPads, that at the time, I mean, now it's not really possible to do, but at the time, everything was still opened up enough. The hardware was still open enough to where you could completely reverse engineer right down to the BIOS. And so you put in effectively the LibreBoot BIOS. Okay, that runs everything. And it's really the only way, they're the only totally open systems out there available. I know they're slightly older. You can still put in a good amount of RAM. You can put in a huge hard drive. You're not going to play, you're not going to play Mortal Kombat XL on it, unfortunately. And for me, it is unfortunate. But, if you're looking to do security, and in fact, we talked about this week on the Patreon episode, people are asking me about Bitcoin hardware wallets. And I expressed my concerns over the hardware wallets. And my ultimate solution was, was to buy like an X200, because it's a smaller little 12-inch computer, to buy like an X200 or a T400 if you want, have Triskel running on it, or if you want to, run Cubes OS. Cubes OS is a great operating system that sandboxes everything. Okay. If sandboxing is what was, and the open source code with BSD, or the power of that code, I should say, is what was saving Mac OS from the CIA getting so hard on it as compared to Windows, then Cubes OS is, your solution on steroids. And it's just a beautiful thing. We've talked about it for years on Sovryn Tech. It's a great operating system, to run with. Either run Triskel, toss Cubes OS on there, or you could do, kind of what I do. And, I run OpenBSD on everything that I can, or run free BSD if you want, whatever. Okay. You're not going to do all the wonders of computing upon them, but as far as communicating, as far as, sending out whatever, setting up wallets, for cryptocurrencies and all this different stuff, I think it's absolutely the best way to go. Okay. They are the X200, the T400, the LibreBoot X200, the LibreBoot T400. In my opinion, these are largely the last systems. Don't talk to me about Prism or it's not Prism, whatever that other company is that's been putting stuff out there. That's a whole other ball game. But anyway, don't just go for these LibreBoots. That they are in many ways the ultimate solution, for much of what we're talking about here. And maybe we'll get into that more, a little bit later. So yeah, get comfy with a good version of Linux, or BSD if you're at that level, and rock and roll. So anyway, before I get into, before we break into the mobile operating systems, I do want to take just a quick moment to thank one of our sponsors. In fact, one of our longest sponsors of Sovryn Tech, and that is Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. And boy, you want to talk about, your system potentially getting hacked and all this by the CIA, and who knows, they might get their hands maybe on your cryptocurrencies, or they might track your cryptocurrency transactions. They might get your Bitcoin or something like that. Well, here's a double solution for you, baby. I mean, this is the real shit. You can use that Bitcoin before anybody can get their hands on it. You can use that Bitcoin, and you can go to Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Just go to the website gold.zog.ninja or rrbi.co. Let them know the Golden Stallion sent you. They're going to know what you're talking about. And you can get golden with them. You can buy gold, silver, platinum, palladium, all that good stuff, and you can really secure your wealth. Diversify this shit. All right? You can get all of it. And you can't hack gold, folks. Not that way. Not like that somebody can steal it unless they, come into your house or something. And that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it, that we're not getting into here. So a great way to secure against these kind of problems is to diversify your wealth, to diversify your investment in value. And a great way to do that, of course, is with precious metals. Okay, so this is definitely an answer to a lot of this. All right, get your hands on some gold and silver. This stuff holds value regardless of what the hell is going on in the world. It really does. Okay, even though Bitcoin's been on a hell of a ride recently, take advantage of the ride. Get your hands on this precious metals. Get the gold, get the silver. I'm a big fan of platinum. Go for that too. Hell, whatever. Okay. But do it through Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. And I cannot thank them enough for appreciating, for understanding, and seeing the importance of the message that Sovryn Tech gets out there, and that this show really uniquely delivers. And in fact, the head guy there, Tim Fry, who's just a sweetheart, he doesn't mind saying it, and I love him for it. So thank them so much for the support of Sovryn Tech, definitely, the importance of getting your hands on that stuff. And I mean, this is definitely a very liberty-friendly company, and privacy-friendly company. Make no mistake, Roberts & Roberts is right on top of the world as far as that goes. They get it. Okay. And so anyway, cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor. So, gold.zog.ninja or rrbi.co, whichever one you remember better. And of course, link is in the show notes for all of the sponsors. And I just want to say this quickly too, especially with all this going on, you got to understand every episode of Sovryn Tech, the show notes, there's an appendix to the show notes where you can find the sponsors, and where you can also, there's extra links perhaps from the show, but there's also links there, like I mentioned, for the LibreBoot X200 and some other things. It is a treasure trove, I assure you. Okay, I curated this very carefully. It is a treasure trove of tools and maybe even hardware and whatever else that you can take advantage of that you can use to help secure your shit. Okay, and to help mitigate these kinds of things, that went down. Now, I don't know if I made it perfectly clear in the last bit when we were talking about the desktop operating systems that Vault 7 particularly was addressing, but let me be clear again, just in case I wasn't, or just in case it wasn't enough for you yet. The sky really is not falling. This is not the end of everything. There are actual solutions to all this. And even to do the cracks that were listed off for, Mac OS and for Windows, even to do those, it is extremely expensive. It is not easy, to do. It really is not. I mean, it's easy once it's set up, to take advantage of the exploits. But they're not easy. This is not something that is happening on a widespread scale, in my opinion, based upon what I've seen. And honestly, it's not just my opinion. There's a lot of other security researchers that have looked into it, and they've said the same. Okay, so take a breather. This is not the end of the world. If you're using a Windows machine, honestly, it's not the end of the world. So, all right. Let's get into what I think some people may consider to be the most important part, and it's definitely been the part that's been kind of broadcasted the most, talked about the most, reported on the most, and also the most misconstrued and the most misrepresented. Let's talk a little bit first here about iOS, and then we'll talk a little bit about Android, and then we'll get into the encryption apps themselves. And of course, we'll have solutions for all of this. So with iOS, CIA files show an extensive list of iOS exploits. Some of these were developed in-house, some obtained from the NSA or Britain's GCHQ, and others were purchased from private vendors. Looks as though at least some of the security bugs were fixed by Apple in recent iOS updates. That'd be like version 8 later, or are otherwise no longer exploitable. For instance, the Redux, or would that be a redo? Sandbox workaround and Xiphos kernel exploit were both used to hack what the documents say specifically, quote, iPhone 4S and later, iPod Touch 5th generation and later, iPad 2 and later, end quote. But both flaws are fixed after being publicized by the Chinese jailbreaker Pangu. While it's likely the exploit list is an old one, a lot of them may still work. iOS 8 appears to have killed off a few, but most of the exploits don't have death dates listed. The Dionetto exploit, developed by GCHQ, allows unsigned code to run on iOS devices, while the CIA's homegrown persistence tool, that's with a capital P, persistence, capital P that... Well, how's that go? Capital P that rhymes with T. No, I got it backwards. I was thinking of Professor Harold Hill, where it's, we got trouble right here in River City with capital T that rhymes with P, which stands for pool. In this case, stands for persistence. But quote, a symbolic link to be created, this would be for iOS 7 and up, or an existing file can be overwritten, that would be with iOS 8 and up, that will run a bootstrapper, giving users initial execution on every boot. So while full root is a goal, the documents also detail an attack known as Captive Portal. This sets up the browser to route all web use through a server run by the CIA. Now, so with iOS, things actually really weren't that bad. And it kind of pains me to say this because I don't want to say an Android fan. I don't know if that's really the best term for me, but I'm an Android, I guess you could say enthusiast maybe, or like my expertise to some degree is in Android. Okay, that's why I have the Dark Android project and all that, which a lot of that also would have addressed much of what got released with Vault 7 here. But iOS seems to be really like they're doing, Apple overall, the guys in Cupertino, the guys and gals in Cupertino are doing a much better job of keeping their stuff secure. This, and not that I haven't admitted that before. I mean, there's been times, varying times, depending on what's going on, where I've said that, look, an iOS device is one of the most secure things you can hold in your pocket. In fact, in that Matthew Green article that I mentioned earlier, Matthew Green also made the same claim. He said that about the most secure thing you can use, is an iOS device. Now, Captive Portal is particularly interesting because, again, that is setting up through, and I don't think, as far as I could tell, it wasn't just Safari that this would affect. It would also affect Chrome. Pretty much any web browser you're using could, send all of your web traffic to a server, that's controlled by the CIA, and then they can look at it all. Okay. And that's, well, that's problematic. And in fact, I didn't see anywhere where, or based upon how Captive Portal works, and maybe I need to do a bit of a deeper reading on it because that is one of the more concerning exploits as far as iOS goes. Would VPNs solve that issue? Would Tor solve that issue? Based upon the way it looks, it might have helped, but yeah, I'm not going to say, specifically, on how exactly that worked because, I mean, again, it is web traffic going to the CIA server and that would potentially encrypt it. Before it got there. But Well, anyway, I don't want to, you do want to be using VPNs and you do want to be using Tor as much as possible on mobile devices, but we'll get into that more when we talk about solutions for all of this. But let's break down into Android, and then, like I said, we'll get into the secure messaging apps and all of this. And how are we doing on time? Holy shit, I've been talking for an hour. How does the Golden Stallion do it? I don't know either. Usually I eat some meat before I get into it. That way, I have the taste of blood in my mouth. Woo! When I'm ready to go on the microphone, and then, I don't know, maybe I'll watch a Van Damme movie or something before I start the show, get the blood flowing. But anyway, Android. This is another one where people were really freaking out, and it's definitely a far worse case than it was for iOS. Because, it is a significantly, when you're looking at the year zero documents, it is a much longer list. In fact, longer perhaps than any of them, as far as the amount of exploits available. Now, why is that? Just right out of the gate, part of it is because of Android's open nature. Now, let's be clear here, and this is the nuance that most mainstream reporters were completely missing out on. And I want to empathize with them. They're not security experts, most of them. Okay, or if they are, maybe they're not the best in the world, because I can't imagine that a lot of these news sources are paying big dick, to these people. So, yeah, I get it, all right? But here's the thing, is that most of the exploits listed for Android were all for Android 4.4 and below. Now, understand this about Android is that before Android 4.4, we talked about this on Sovryn Tech before, Android was a much more open system than it is now, like significantly, okay? And in fact, a lot of people often have concerns, security concerns, and now I guess they're kind of well-founded, but at the same time, there's an alternative purpose to this. A lot of people have concerns like when Sony comes out with their new Walkman, okay? When they came out with their new Walkman, it was an Android-based device, and it cost, like $1,300. There was like that gold-plated one, right? You remember that? It was, I think it was at Mobile World Congress, maybe last year or the year previous. When that came out, it came with a version of Android 4.2, and everybody was making fun of Sony for like, wait a minute, you're charging me hundreds of dollars or $1,000, whatever, for this gold-plated, Walkman, which some people see as just a completely antiquated idea. I don't agree, but you're going to charge that much. And then you're putting such an old version of Android on it? No, there was a reason for that. Because they put Android 4.2 because Android 4.2 and before, you could get a lot deeper into the Android operating system. And you could do a lot of audio tricks, a lot of custom audio tricks, because that was really what the Walkman was offering to you, was a lot of these custom codecs, a lot of this custom compression, and, and custom, equalization, sound equalization and all that. It needed Android 4.2, you understand. You didn't, it wasn't even a choice. So that's the thing. That's why a lot of these Android exploits, yeah, I bet they're very legitimate. I bet they worked. I bet they were used. Okay. But a lot of them now may not be possible. And I say may, I could be wrong. And like I said, there's going to be more releases. Year zero is just the first one out of Vault 7. Okay. There might be a lot more, and we might find out some more new things, but based upon the information presented to me as it is here, okay, is that a lot of the stuff that got listed off for Android might not even really affect it anymore. And also, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Apple and Alphabet/Google both came out and said, look, we've already patched so much of this, and we're fixing everything else right now. Okay, we're making it happen fast. It does speak to the fact that you really want, and I know what I was just saying about Android 4.2 and, as compared to newer versions and all this stuff. But, based upon what you can actually do and today you really need, a lot of apps start building in the ability to or not the ability, but they start building in abilities that are only possible through newer versions of, say, Android or iOS. So you really want, just for that, to use, say, mobile devices to their full potential and why they even bother to exist, as well as, to get the latest security stuff, you want to be going with companies and phones that are good about this, that actually do put out security patches often and all that. Now, as far as in the Android space, in iOS, it's simple. You buy an Apple device. Apple's the only one that, pushes the stuff out. That's part of the reason I think that Apple may not have been hit so hard, by a lot of what was laid out in year zero, because they have such kind of tyrannical control of both the software and the hardware. Okay. Most companies don't have that. Certainly Microsoft doesn't. All right. But there's advantages and disadvantages to all of that. So anyway, but as far as with Android goes, if you're wanting part of a solution to this, well, yeah, you want to be buying, either Google's Pixel phones or their Nexus phones, or, you want to be buying something from Samsung, maybe. And honestly, in a lot of ways, those are your only two choices of companies that regularly put out updates. I mean, some other companies are kind of okay about it. Like Asus is pretty good about it. LG might be all right about it. But those are the two, really that I think you can kind of count on to get these security patches that could at least address much of what was being discussed, within the Vault 7 leaks here. So with Android, like I said, much longer list. There are exploits such as Kronos and Creatine that attack specific flaws in Qualcomm's Adreno GPU drivers. Then there's Starmy and Snubble, which those actually, and ironically, only work against Samsung headsets. But again, Samsung does do a great job of updating a lot of this stuff and, and locking their shit down. Think of like Samsung Knox and all that. They definitely take security seriously. And they're one of the few companies out there that I would say that they are putting enough money into proper security practices and proper security teams for everything they do. So even though those are specifically addressed at Samsung, understand that they were created not because Samsung is some kind of like a broken target, but because it's so popular that they know they wanted to, they wanted exploits that could go after Samsung specifically because so many people have it. Also a lot of Chrome-based attacks for Android, which that's interesting. Maybe a lot of those could have been solved if Google just would fucking unlock that last 5% of closed source code in Chrome. Maybe not. Anyway, link in the show notes where you can check out a lot more of those. There's 3 implants listed, which is Bowtie, Sucker Punch, and Roid Rage. I love the names on these things. The release notes for Roid Rage show it can monitor all radio functions and allows SMS stealing. While the bulk of the exploits listed allow for escalation of privileges, allowing malicious apps to gain more or total control of the infected device, there are some like Baron Samedi, Doug Trio, and Salazar that allow for remote access. Many of these have been shut down in phones running Android version 4.4 and higher, but bear in mind that the list is 3 years old and the revised grab bag of exploits currently in use could be more effective against more Android builds. So that's kind of the point, is that this really is like 3-year-old stuff, and there are, could new exploits have been developed? Certainly, I could imagine that, but a lot of the stuff is, a lot of what we know of here has already been patched. And, kind of the good thing to come out of it also is to let people know, that this is happening in the first place. I mean, what's the old saying from Thufir Hawat, the Mentat, right? Is that, the first step in avoiding a trap is in knowing of its existence. Well, now we know unquestionably of its existence and what these kind of vectors look like, and that lends one to solving it and to avoiding it, in all of this. So there might be, new versions of all this stuff. Again, like we said, a lot of this was designed for much older versions of Android, and newer ones might not be so much of a problem. But maybe there isn't. Maybe there isn't. But we'll save kind of that conversation for later on. So Android, as long as you're using, newer versions of Android, a lot of this really shouldn't be a problem. Android does have the very real issue that I already brought up, that, not every, Android, handset or tablet or whatever gets all the latest updates. Most of them probably aren't updated well at all. You can look at the adoption numbers of, what version of Android is the most popular in the world and all this, and it's always like 3-4 years behind. And that is a problem. I have no problem admitting that. When I talk about the Dark Android project, which you can go to darkandroid.info to find out more about that. And I might have some interesting things coming in the very near future as far as that goes, especially with this in mind. One of my big concerns was that, okay, the hardware that you buy, if you want to set up a really secure Android device, you got to make sure that it's hardware that has open source versions of Android, or more open source versions of Android readily available for it, or that get regular updates. Okay. Like for example, my top, Dark Android device has been the 2013 Nexus 7 ever since I started the Dark Android project, because it gets, AOSP, which is it's Android, but it's the open source version of Android. Okay. That you can constantly update to. It doesn't even have Google's code in it. It is completely, or, like the Google Play Store code and all those, instantly installed apps that could potentially be an exploit or a problem, or, Google itself is a problem. So let's be clear on that. But, that way you have AOSP, or you can put CyanogenMod, or what's now it's called Lineage OS. They changed the name of it for varying reasons. We talked about that a few months ago. You want to make sure that you're getting devices that are constantly updated. You do not want to be stuck to where these kinds of exploits that I just listed off can affect you. You just don't. And that's really how you mitigate that. It can be a double-edged sword because maybe those updates allow for new exploits, certainly, but deal with the devil you know. All right. And this is the devil we know. And the way to cure it is to have your fucking stuff, your operating systems updated as much as possible right now. Okay. So that, there's a very quick and easy solution, for that is to make sure you're buying, just look at the track records. Okay. As far as, what devices get updated most of the time. It's not hard to look up this data. All right. I mean, I can tell you already it's, the latest Samsung's and, Google's Nexus or Pixel line. All right. Those are your surer bets. Okay, but there's other stuff too, where they talk about it. So anyway, why don't we get into I don't think that there's a whole point in talking about like the antivirus problems. Look, I've been telling you forever, stop using antivirus. Okay, there's a bunch of cracks in here that we could break down, but we didn't need Vault 7 to tell us to not use antivirus. Okay, antivirus software. Like it wasn't necessary. So I don't think I'm going to spend, much time talking about that. Let's get into what I think a lot of people found particularly interesting. And that is what was, supposedly talked about with Signal, WhatsApp, and pretty much, I think in some tweets that WikiLeaks themselves discussed, pretty much like every supposed encrypted, messaging app out there. They mentioned Telegram. I mean, they brought up a ton of them. So anyways, here's the funny thing is that WikiLeaks was saying, now we got to be super clear on this. Like I said earlier in the show, if you do a search, okay, you hit your good old fashioned Control F and you type in Signal or you type in WhatsApp or whatever for all of these year 7 documents, or year 0 documents, you get nothing. Nothing comes up. I mean, Signal will come up, like maybe when they're talking about signal intelligence, but not Signal, the app will come up. But WikiLeaks went for the sensational headline saying that, it's all done. These apps, they're screwed. If you've been using it, it's all over. Everybody's privacy's gone, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was nuts. And so many people bought right into it. Reporters bought right into it. And they went hook, line, sinker with what WikiLeaks was saying. Now, I was very pleased, and I was kind of watching the live tweets of this on March 7th, on Tuesday. And Open Whisper Systems immediately started tweeting right at WikiLeaks. Now, let's be clear here, okay? Open Whisper Systems is absolutely an anarchist company. Okay, I'm an anarchist. WikiLeaks, I don't know that I can make that claim. But Open Whisper Systems, Moxie Marlinspike, the head guy there, totally avowed anarchist, and a lot of people appreciate, even people that aren't anarchists themselves, are so glad that he is because they know he's not beholden to any government. All right. So anyway, Signal, one could almost argue is an anarchist app if you wanted to go that far, right? All right. But anyway, the great thing was that Open Whisper Systems, the creators of Signal, they immediately went on the attack against WikiLeaks and said, you show me. They had it right in the tweets. It was awesome. I was hearting and retweeting all day. You show us where it says Signal's cracked, where Signal is broken. WikiLeaks did pretty much nothing because it wasn't. Signal's not broken. Okay? WhatsApp? Well, WhatsApp is a whole other thing. And before you think that I'm some kind of Open Whisper Systems /Signal fanboy, okay, I criticized personally Moxie Marlinspike's retort to the concerns that WhatsApp was broken. I think WhatsApp, I think it is broken. Okay. Now WhatsApp, let's be clear on this. WhatsApp, very popular, billion users, whatever. Okay. Very popular around the world, not so much in the US. A lot of people got excited about it because they baked in, the axolotl, or I think now they're just calling it the Signal protocol. They baked in the Signal protocol automatically. They turn the switch on. And so everything, every WhatsApp message that goes out, unless I guess if you turn it off, which I don't know why people would do that, will be encrypted with some of the best encryption the world's ever seen. Great. That's nice. The problem is that the implementation, and Moxie has kind of admitted this. He said that when he talked about the implementation of Signal into WhatsApp, of the Signal protocol into WhatsApp, and because the Facebook Messenger also has the Signal protocol baked into it as well now. And I think both times, certainly with Facebook Messenger, he said specifically that it's a good implementation. Now, he didn't say it was perfect. He didn't say it was, I feel like, and maybe I'm reading too much into his words, but I've talked about this before. Okay. But the way that Signal was implemented in these things, I still think that there's a lot of ugly metadata and a lot of other data being collected, and that anything owned by Facebook is absolutely a honeypot. I would not trust WhatsApp, not because of what came out of Vault 7, but because of what we've already talked about for a very long time, that WhatsApp's encryption implementation is not as good as just using the pure Signal app. Okay. So I guess let's get this out of the way. Should you still use Signal? Absolutely. Absolutely still use Signal. Go ye forward and do likewise, okay? Go use Signal. Tell everybody to use Signal. Absolutely. All right? That has not changed because Signal is not broken. All right? Now, what is being claimed and what apparently WikiLeaks meant, even though they completely sensationalized and misinformed so many people, and I don't even know how many hearts and retweets that fucking tweet got that said that Signal's broken. And WhatsApp and whatever else. Okay. But, what they may have meant was that the operating systems, iOS and Android, are quote unquote broken and, can easily be exploited and, you can have injection attacks, whatever. Okay. And that means that, so no matter what you do on Android, or on iOS, it's being recorded. Okay. And so even though you're encrypting it, it's still being recorded on the device itself, and the CIA is recording and storing what exactly you're sending out. All right, folks. Yes. Is that possible? Absolutely. Yes. Has it happened? Probably. I'm sure something along these lines has been done. But here's where we got to get into some here's where we got to break into a big reality check. Okay. And I've already hinted at this throughout the episode. Understand this. Doing this shit is, doing these kinds of attacks, targeting people, okay, breaking down to, okay, exactly what phone do you want to get this on? Because you can't just, it's not, at least according to Vault 7, what we see from Vault 7, if we're basing it upon what we see out of these year zero documents, okay, it's not like it's just some OTA, some over-the-air update or something that suddenly, the CIA's in. It's not like that. There's targeting. There's very specific attacks, maybe even physical, kind of attacks that, where somebody has to, pop something onto the device, whatever, and then obviously pull it away, however it has to be, some physical injection. Somehow, that's what has to be done. Now, I have said since the beginning, since I started this show, since I started Sovryn Tech all the way back in 2012, okay, I said the only thing you can really do, okay, I said, look, if you're targeted, okay, by the NSA, CIA, FBI, AT&T, they all work for the government. If you're targeted by any of them, if you're targeted, you specifically are targeted, there's not much you can do. You are you are done. Okay, I've made that so clear. I've said that so many times. If you don't know that, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, the other thing I said is that all you can really do is make it expensive for them. Even if this stuff gets broken, make it expensive for them. Back when we found out that, Telegram, there's some real problems with this or something. Still using it makes it expensive for them, because there's still that extra leap that they have to go through. And all of those things, look, I know you think they have a printing press where they can just keep printing out money and they can spend whatever they want to do whatever they want and all this stuff. But it really doesn't necessarily work that way. Okay. Not every phone on the planet is cracked. All right. The CIA has not put malware on every Android phone and every iOS phone. It just hasn't happened. And it can't happen because, again, it is expensive. A lot of these things, a lot of these tricks, a lot of these exploits that get laid out, really, it takes a lot of work to get those set up. And they don't have the manpower. They just don't have it. So you gotta stop. You gotta relax. You gotta breathe. Okay? Most of us, really, we're not walking around with malware in our pockets because it's near physically impossible, for these things to be at that level. So Signal still does work very well for a lot of people. Now, again, if you get targeted, if you're in their sights, very different story. Very different story. And we've talked about this a bunch of times. You don't even have to crack Signal. We talked about, and I challenge people to do this all the time. Okay. Go to Snopes, right? That's the big site about debunking and everything. And if you think there's a conspiracy around Snopes, that's fine, whatever. But that doesn't change my point here. Go to Snopes, and I want you to type in mosquito drones. And you know what's going to come up with? It comes up with inconclusive, meaning that they can't prove or disprove that, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that they do, but not enough evidence to say that they're absolutely real, that there is such a thing as a drone the size of a mosquito, and we know how much the CIA loves their little drone fleets, don't we? Okay, the size of a mosquito that could just like fly over your shoulder for a little bit. Granted, battery power is the thing. We have the laws of physics, thankfully, that take on the laws of government and usually whoop them in the ass most of the time. But anyway, and it could just see what you're typing. And what are you going to do then? Again, if you're targeted, you can't do much. But if you're not targeted, this stuff works. And there's lots of steps, lots of attitudes, all these different things that you can do right now. And that the more people use it, the harder it is to target other people because you are eliminating their ability to spy on others when you, in your own life, take on the best security and privacy and anonymity practices. Okay, and if you want to go to darkandroid.info to get an idea, it's a little, I have to update it, but you can get an idea of what exactly that attitude looks like. It's kind of the steps you have to take, et cetera, okay, to make all that happen. But this is not, look, Signal's not broken. WhatsApp's not broken. Android is not that broken. Not as broken as people were, kind of being led to believe. iOS is probably, again, Apple's been doing, like I said, I hate to say it, but they've been doing a bang up job of keeping a lot of this stuff closed up. Not everything is broken, folks. Now, I want to talk about, all right, I think that answers the whole thing with the encrypted messaging. Use it, okay? Use it. Even if it is broken, make it fucking expensive. Make them have to work for it to get a look at what you're typing out, baby. Okay? I will say, actually, this is a solution I want to get to, and I'll get to it now. I've been criticized for recommending. I've said, look, I like PGP more than I like Signal. Okay, and PGP, of course, pretty good privacy, pretty good protection, whatever. For email, and I said because you can roll your own, you can kind of do it yourself, you can set up on your own server and anything. You're not so much trusting Signal, even though when the FBI went to Signal, Open Whisper Systems didn't give them shit, which is great. But I'm a big fan of PGP, and, at the end of the day with a lot of this, because we're going to get into some of the other aspects that aren't so much, that has to do with devices. At the end of the day, I think having that, using the right operating system, having email with a great PGP solution on it, okay, use Thunderbird with Enigmail, which we've talked about recently. Remember, everybody got a good look at Mark Zuckerberg's desktop. Guess what one of the apps on his or one of the pieces of software on his little MacBook was? It was Thunderbird. I guarantee you he had Enigmail running on there. Or, he had a PGP, GPG implementation of some kind, rocking on that. I mean, for fuck's sake, he had his USB ports taped over. Okay, and he had tape over the webcam, the whole thing. I mean, that was a paranoiacs machine, and you can learn from that. So, get comfortable with using PGP. If if Thunderbird is you don't want to mess with that. If setting up, Enigmail and everything, which is about as, it's pretty easy these days to go through that process. If that's not enough for you, or if that's too much for you, you can get Mailvelope, which works with Firefox or Chrome, or a Chrome-based browser. Mailvelope is a very, very easy way to set up PGP within like a web email portal. Okay, so if you have a Gmail address, and it works with a bunch of them, it works with Gmail, works with Outlook, works with GMX. Works with a bunch of these different ones. And you can set up, you just install the extension on your web browser, and you can get PGP rocking in pretty short order that way. If you're using Android, okay, and this is the thing, this is one of the solutions, is that if you're really concerned about Signal, okay, well, let's start talking about, getting private keys going, okay? Using keybase.io and a lot of this. If you're using Android, there's Open PGP Keychain. This is probably the easiest way to set up a PGP key and PGP email. You'll use K9, the email app that's called K9, and then you'll use Open PGP Keychain. And that, with those two working in concert, there's a setting that you have to set up, okay, to where you tell it to connect instantly with Open PGP Keychain, and then you'll be good to go, and you'll be sending out, PGP emails right out of the gate. Now, if you're concerned that Android is busted, well, again, rock either Mailvelope or the Thunderbird with Enigmail. Okay, it's Enigmail. Okay, with that add-on, and you should be in good shape. Thunderbird's, totally open source. I mean, that code's been looked over, 6 ways to Sunday. So, I'm definitely very comfortable recommending that, and people getting comfortable with using PGP email. Been saying it for years, but I still think it's true. If you're one of those, and if you still think, well, shit, no, I don't trust you, Stallion. I think that these mobile operating systems are screwed. If you are of that attitude, fine. But then you better hop on PGP. I mean, and there's other stuff, there's versions of TorChat and other shit coming out that hopefully, will improve upon this. There's OTR if you want to set up an OTR system with Pigeon or something like this, even though Pigeon has its own issues because some stuff is stored in clear text. There's a lot of things. When you get onto a desktop operating system, there are a lot of great options, to set up, to communicate with people. And they really have become easy. I mean, PGP didn't become a thing because it was hard to set up. I really don't think it's that hard anymore. And there's great, on YouTube, there's great videos you can look up that teach you how to set all this stuff, especially with Enigmail and Thunderbird. I really recommend getting on board with PGP. And I don't feel so crazy now, when I say that. I mean, look, Signal's not broken. Signal's not broken. There's nothing wrong with Signal. But I've been saying for a long time that, if you want real security, stop relying on, on these phones. That's got to be done on the desktop. And in my interpretation of what I saw in Vault 7 really bolstered that point, that we should be relying more on our desktops because we have a lot more control of them. I respectfully and I mean that with all respect, I respectfully disagree with Matthew Green. And, set that up and be rocking from your desktop from here on out. Okay, like that's, for the stuff that really matters, that's really important. If you want to set up Tails, the Tails operating system, go ahead. All of that. Okay, and if you want to get a really great computer, links in the show notes, baby. I think that's Ministry of Freedom is the company that makes, or that, that sells them. But get your hands on those LibreBoot computers. Okay, LibreBoot T400 or the X200. If you want to get really, really serious. All right. So anyway, I want to change things up here, and we're going to talk about some different devices. We're going to talk about TVs. We're going to talk about cars, and we might get into a little bit of IoT as well. And actually, I do want to talk about, there was some discussion of like CD and, optical media attacks that I want to mention as well. And then I want to give you the overarching why I think this even happened. Okay, but before I do, just want to thank another sponsor, and I cannot thank them enough. They've also been a longtime sponsor, and that is CryptoCompare.com. CryptoCompare.com, this is a tab that I keep open on my computer at all times because I am always, especially when that Bitcoin ETF nonsense happened and everything, I watch this shit like a hawk. And CryptoCompare.com, it gives you all the latest prices on all the most popular cryptocurrencies. It gives you reviews on wallets. It gives you, you get great social aspect to it. There's just a whole slew of options of things to do at CryptoCompare.com. It is, in my opinion, the number one resource, okay, for anything that's going on in cryptocurrency. Like I said, I leave it open 24/7. Just a top-notch website, and I cannot thank them enough for being a supporter of Sovryn Tech and for appreciating the message, that gets out there, or that it gets out there. And every sponsor just means the world to me. So I appreciate it when you, the listeners, go and frequent them. And I also want to give a very special thank you. Recently, we had a lot more patrons join up on the Sovryn Tech Patreon, and which means you are getting access to hundreds of hours of content only available to Sovryn Tech patrons. Thank you so much for that. Some of you significantly increased your donation amounts monthly, and I was just, I woke up one morning and saw that, and man, I'm not kidding, I almost went to tears. It was so nice. And this will allow, when you sign up through Patreon, and as we get more sponsors, it allows for more episodes of Sovryn Tech. Eventually, we can get to the point, we can get to the goal. You can go to SovrynTech.com to see about all this. We can get to the goal to where there can be multiple episodes of Sovryn Tech a week, and we can cover all of this stuff, even more. Like this whole episode is turning into completely all about Vault 7. Okay, as to where I had a whole bunch of stories I wanted to talk about, some of which I thought were, I think they're all interesting, but, particularly hot and really white hot. But I'm not going to be able to get to them. But if, as we get more people in with the show, then, I can do more episodes. I can be afforded the time to do that. So thank you so much to all the patrons and, of course, to all the sponsors. All right, no more breaks. Let's get into this. And we will get into what I think is actually going on, why Vault 7 even happened. All right, because I have an opinion that I think is little expressed, and maybe even unique. So, all right, real quick, I want to just touch on the optical media, the CDs and DVD attacks. And it's true. Look, there's still plenty of people in the world that use CDs and DVDs. Folks, how does, I bring this up all the time. How does Facebook do all of their long-term storage? They use Blu-rays, not servers. They use Blu-rays. There you go. Okay. So optical media is still a thing in the world, even by the biggest companies on the planet. So the CIA developed code called Hammer Drill that exploits pretty much the optical media storage medium. Version 2 of the software allows an infected computer to log what CDs and DVDs are being read by the user, for how long, and the data they contain. CIA also added a function in the second build that allows it to install a hidden Trojan in new disks being burned if the target is using the popular Nero burning software, which Stallion breaking in, I used, holy shit, I used Nero forever, for years. Back when I was big into burning DVDs, it was just movies. What the hell are they going to see? But man, Nero was the go-to because it was so lightweight back in the day. I know Nero kept going, but I remember, I think it was version 7 of Nero, and I just never upgraded after that because then they just kept adding in bullshit features and they started weighing the software down. But Nero was hot, no pun intended. So anyway, the developer notes state that a 279-byte shellcode can be burned onto optical media that'll run on 32-bit Windows systems. The documents note that Kaspersky antivirus can be bypassed in this way. So just this code can get put onto a CD or DVD, maybe a Blu-ray. There wasn't so much discussion of Blu-rays. And that code could actually wipe out the antivirus software that you had just from putting in a CD or a DVD. Now, this is important to talk about because, and I recommend this too. A lot of people recommend that, say if you're doing anything, that you really want to keep prying eyes out of, you will use a live CD or live DVD of an operating system, right? An operating system burned onto a DVD, and you'll go and do your thing, and then you put in the DVD so you don't have to boot up to the hard drive or whatever, and then when you're done doing whatever business that you wanted to do, that you wanted to keep particularly private or anonymous, you will take out the DVD. Maybe you'll shred it. I don't know. Even though it's, the only place it stores anything is in local RAM. Yep, there's concerns about that. I get it. Okay. But you get my point, is that this is a way that a lot of people try to do things securely. So if, the CIA, I can totally understand why they would see it to be very important to get some kind of, malicious content onto optical media. Okay, it really does make sense. It's not a waste of time for them, even today, let alone 3 years ago when a lot of this documentation was from. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, that was the thing too, something to keep in mind, because I imagine a lot of my listeners do use, optical storage for varying reasons, even today. All right, 2 more things, and then we'll get into the wrap up here. Let's talk about the smart TVs. Now, this would make for a hell of an Internet of Targets segment. Okay. And in fact, I had a lot of listeners message me and say, they read the article about what the Samsung TVs were doing, and it was specifically Samsung TVs. In fact, I think it was the F800 smart TVs, particularly that did this. But, they were saying, look, this could have been a Sovryn Tech episode 2 years ago, because you said that they'd probably be doing this. Well, what are they doing? So CIA and the British spies at MI5 have developed an attack known as Weeping Angel. Boy, that's a hell of a name. But Weeping Angel, this can put smart TVs and Samsung, again, the F800 series is the one that's particularly mentioned, into what's called a quote-unquote fake off mode, which makes the device look like it's powered down and even turns off the LEDs. Okay. However, it's still on and can now be used as a bugging device. The Wi-Fi keys the TV uses are also slurpable. They can be collected and all, so they can get your Wi-Fi passwords through your TVs. Folks, this is what I say in every Internet of Target segment. Okay, is that all of these internet connected devices, all of this IoT, the Internet of Things, all of that is a gateway into the rest of your life. They could even grab your Wi-Fi password off of these devices. Yeah. Okay, that's just one aspect. Exploit was developed, and the documents show areas of interest that CIA hackers wanted to research, notably leaving Wi-Fi on and enabling video capture to get into caches of stored audio recordings and setting up a man-in-the-middle attack against the television's browser. So TV is compromised via. So now here's the thing. Okay, so that's really bad. So effectively, literally, I love what's the old jokes like in Soviet Russia or in Soviet America, TV watches you, right? And that's exactly what was going on. It was either listening or watching you. Now I have 2 points about this, but let's understand first off, is that as bad as this is, and it is bad in my opinion. Okay, and this is something, in fact, I remember even talking about this. I said, I guarantee you the Microsoft Kinect for the Xbox, I bet that shit was watching you. Well, if your Samsung TV is watching you, it's a pretty good bet that a lot of that other stuff was too. Now, with the Samsung TVs, to be able to do it, to take over a TV like that, it wasn't just a signal that they could send over the coax cable, okay, or through the cable box or something. They actually had to connect a USB stick into, and most smart TVs, well, actually every smart TV anyway, has a USB port on it. Okay, so yes, your TV, this could potentially happen to it. But somebody would have to physically connect a USB stick to it. Now, granted, the question becomes, could they do it, say, in transit, right? It's not like somebody has to really break into your house, but maybe they'd have to do it at the UPS shipping center or something. Where exactly does this get done? Well, that's a whole other, aspect of how the CIA does business. Okay. But, the point being is that understand this is an expensive thing to do. Well, I think this is totally worthy of freaking out about. Okay, because it is so 1984, like more 1984 than maybe anything else, listed off in Vault 7. Not saying that the others aren't worse, just saying that this is one that, wow, boy, this really smacks of Orwell. You really have to physically be there to make it happen. Okay, and that's expensive to do. Regardless of where it gets done, that is an expensive process, and that is something that is really only going to be done, in my opinion, is my understanding of how these things work, would only be done on very targeted individuals. It's not something that they're going to do on every TV, that comes in. I mean, it's just not. So that's something to consider. But this is the one, ironically, that really has, it kind of has the simplest answer. And that is, if you can, and I know this is hard because I try not buying a smart TV today. You really can't. Like the best thing, as I've said before, the best thing you can do is, buy a computer monitor and then just hook up a bunch of shit to it, right? Through the HDMI ports. Okay. Make sure it has plenty of HDMI ports because it's near impossible to find a TV that's not smart. So, I mean, but that's the solution, is that just don't buy this smart shit. I keep telling you, that's why I have an entire Internet of Targets segment on Sovryn Tech, is because I'm trying to convince you, yes, I am absolutely, for my own security, okay, because the more insecure you are, the less secure I am. For my own security, I'm trying to tell you, don't buy into this crap. Let this market category die the death it needs to die, because it is such a huge problem. And there was even more. I mean, there was, the CIA was actively, in the documents, like they were really looking at, okay, how do we subvert IoT? And they have an entire branch of the CIA that looks into how to do this, the embedded development branch. And there's talk about it. So, yeah, well, let's see. The documents here are somewhat scant, but from meeting notes in 2014, it's clear that analysts are looking at self-driving cars, customized consumer hardware, Linux-based embedded systems, and whatever else they can get their hands on. Those Amazon Echo or Google Home devices are looking less and less attractive every day. So anyway, yeah. Stay away from this IoT stuff. Just don't do it. The TVs, whatever. Yeah, these TVs are watching you. Yes, they are listening to you. I remember we covered a story maybe a year or two ago on Sovryn Tech where a person said that they were fairly certain that that the TV itself was sending out some kind of signal and that his phone was receiving it because the show that he or she was watching was, suddenly he or she received an ad in their Twitter feed for that television show, and they would never watch that television show. I mean, I'm being very basic in the details around it, but it made a very compelling case that I talked about, for a whole segment on Sovryn Tech because, what exactly? I mean, that's a whole other aspect that this didn't even cover. It's like, okay, well, if they're listening to you, can they also transmit a little bit of stuff, right? And this gets into a larger point as well, which is this, that it's funny how everything has a standby mode today. Not new for Sovryn Tech listeners. I've complained about the lack of a power switch for so long. And in fact, I even have a saying. I have a saying that the world is dying from the lack of physical switches. And it's true because like you really don't turn anything off anymore unless you unplug it. Everything goes into standby mode. And the funny thing is that, I mean, and it's amazing that the document was so clear on this. It's like, well, make sure with these, F800 Samsung televisions that the little red LED, that's got to go off too. Make sure they have no idea that this thing's still on. It's kind of creepy that everything wants to stay plugged in and that they give you kind of incentives even to do it. But, companies give you incentives to do it, like to keep your, all of your data and settings and whatever, your last channel that you were on, and all this shit, all together. As to where, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago even, or, maybe even 10, when you turned something off, that shit was off. Like you knew, like there was a hard cutoff. Like the button would actually move in and out because it was actually, it was closing off the circuit. Not anymore. Now everything's just a little push button. If it's even a button, sometimes it's just a little, flat, little touch button, that you hit that ends up turning everything off. But again, as we see now, it's not really off. And how many things besides TVs is that affecting? Ooh. That's creepy. That more so than the TV even watching so much. I mean, which granted, that's why it uses it. But like that little bit of firmware hacking, yeah, that one bothers the fuck out of me. But again, it doesn't bother me so much because this is the easiest one to solve. Don't have the goddamn TV, that has these capabilities. That's simple. You can vote with your dollar, right? Be an educated consumer. Now, the last bit, okay, that I want to talk about here, and there's others, and there's probably going to be more. We might end up with news stories that have to do with Vault 7. Maybe there'll be, like we said, there'll be year 1, year 2. Right now, we're just covering year 0 for an entire 2-hour episode, okay? But this one is important to get out, and then I just want to spend a few minutes saying what exactly, what I think the reality is around all of this, okay? But, briefly mentioned about cars and how cars could be hacked. This was a part of part of the whole Vault 7 release. And it's talking specifically about modern cars, particularly ones, I guess, that can receive over-the-air updates. We've covered this before. If you remember, Andy Greenberg did that write-up for Wired, where they did, just from thousands of miles away, hackers were able to take control of, what was it, a Jeep? Wasn't it? Was it a Cherokee? I think it's either a Jeep Liberty or a Jeep Cherokee. They were able to take it over. They can control the brakes. They ran the car off the side of the road with Andy Greenberg in it. It was all a controlled test, but they did it, and they got access through the car's entertainment system, which, yes, we talked about it on Sovryn Tech. Those systems should all be, we talked about sandboxing this whole episode. All of those different components of a car should be completely sandboxed away from each other so that that's not possible. Your radio should not control your steering column, okay, or your brake pedals, right? That you think that'd just be obvious, but no, of course, these companies don't give a shit about that. They just want to bootstrap onto, what they think is, Silicon Valley's little gold mine, when actually, maybe it's a uranium mine and it's killing everybody. Okay, but who it may have killed. Okay, so now we know that the CIA can do exactly what Andy Greenberg went through in that Jeep. And this is the one thing I was impressed by, because as soon as I heard about the car getting controlled and the potential for it, and it was kind of in the wording that it could be used as an assassination device, meaning that the CIA could take control of a modern car, okay, with all of its computer systems and everything, and just ram it into a tree. The instant I read about that, my mind so quickly said, Michael Hastings. Now, if you don't remember Michael Hastings, okay, Michael Hastings was a journalist, very famous for his coverage with Newsweek of the Iraq War in the early aughts. And he was working for BuzzFeed, worked for Rolling Stone. And this was back in June. It was, in fact, the day he died, because he's dead now. The day he died, it was June 18th, 2013. And he was claiming that he had a huge story, a very important story that he wasn't willing to really talk about much, until effectively the time was right. And what happens, on a certain, summer's day? Well, I guess it'd be a spring day if it's the 18th still, right? But anyway, on that sunny day, his car, just happens, it was a Mercedes C250 coupe at approximately 4:25 a.m. So yeah, late at night. But in the Hancock Park neighborhood of Los Angeles, he crashed. His car, and sparks started flying. Literally, the car went into flames after it crashed into a palm tree. And there was video footage of this from a nearby security camera, the whole thing. And people have, even when that happened, okay, because I mean, people were saying, okay, no, something's not right here. We think there was foul play involved with, this crash that Michael Hastings went through. And the FBI had files on this guy. I mean, this is somebody, we talk about this whole episode. We've been talking about how, look, really the only time a lot of this stuff is going to affect you, like in a way that maybe, would freak you out, is if you are being targeted. Well, guess what? Michael Hastings had an FBI file. This guy was one of the guys. If anybody in the world was targeted, Michael Hastings was probably one of them. Whatever the hell that big story he had was, we're never going to know, okay, because unfortunately the guy's dead. Yeah, but maybe it was something so big that the CIA said, okay, and again, this fits in the time frame. We're talking June 18th, 2013, 3 years, which is at the time that all of this year zero stuff is from. Okay, maybe they said, okay, take control of this guy's car and you ram that bitch into a palm tree. Is that what happened? What was the story? What did Michael Hastings have to say? This guy, I mean, this isn't a person who gets scared easily. I mean, this is a man who was over in Iraq. I can appreciate that. I mean, that definitely gives you a new outlook on fear or not having it, as I had been over there myself. So what the hell happened there? Yeah, I mean, I think people to instantly associate, that this exploit of taking over a car and using it as an assassination device. I mean, maybe not even to kill the driver. Maybe it's just, to do, I mean, who knows? Like some other people. What about all these, that are happening around the world where at like parades or something, some wild truck just goes through and kills, however many people or something. I mean, could effectively the CIA take over the vehicle and use it as, as a meat grinder? Maybe. I hate to be so dire on that, but holy shit. And it's funny too, because I get a lot of crap, especially from Sovryn Tech listeners who keep on listening to the show anyway. Or on social media. I get a lot of crap from people because I'm not a fan. I always say, it's like, look, I love pre-96 cars. Okay. I don't know why I need a computer in my car. I'm not interested in it. I want my older cars, baby. My favorite car I ever owned, of course, is a 73 Ford LTD that I only got rid of before I moved to New Hampshire. Kind of wish I kept it. But anyway, and I've said that because, look, I don't trust these computers in these cars at all. And people give me so much crap, about that. Well, who's laughing now? Who's crazy now for saying that they shouldn't have a computer in the car? What the hell's this? The CIA can use it to not just kill you, potentially, Michael Hastings, or potentially, hey, I mean, we're being theoretical here, granted it's speculation, but maybe they could kill, tons of people with these things. Ooh. How about those cars? And then, because the immediate answer I get, well, you ever fly in an airplane, Brian Sovryn? Those are all fly-by-wire. Everything's computerized in them. Sure. Okay. Well, how do you feel about that? Like, that, I mean, and I'm waiting for that to happen. I'm not even going to go that far. But I'm just saying I can imagine some people who would start saying, oh, is this what happened to those Malaysia flights? Did the CIA take over the plane? Blah, 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 9/11, blah, blah. I'm not even going to go there. That's not, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what we've got right here, concrete. Okay, is that, yes, they have talked about using cars as assassination devices by taking control of them over the air. That's a doozy. That's one that's not getting enough press. Okay, and again, I'm just going to say it, Michael Hastings. If you don't know his case, I recommend you look into it. Okay, so there you go. That is the bulk. I'm sure there's more, but those are the big ones that have either been, heavily misrepresented or heavily discussed anyway, that have been going around, that are within, the whole Vault 7 thing. I mean, there's tons to talk about. I could spend hours and hours more talking about each one of these things, breaking down, even further. Okay. The solutions are, like I said, rely more on your desktops. Consider getting into a different desktop operating system and securing that shit down. Keep using Signal. Signal is not broken. Okay. And largely these mobile operating systems, I mean, a lot of this stuff is already getting patched up. It really, really is. Okay. So do that. As far as the car thing, I'll leave that to your personal opinion and taste. Okay, again, because keep in mind, the most important thing here to understand is that these attacks are expensive to do, and really they're only going to affect people. I mean, they affect everybody indirectly, of course. Okay, but directly, it's only going to affect people that are actually being targeted. So think about ways to mitigate being a targeted individual. All right, and I could spend a whole episode on that. Maybe I'll do a Patreon episode on something of that sort. Okay, but those are the real solutions. There's a lot of FUD going on around this stuff. Okay, there's a lot of fear that is completely unnecessary. There's a lot of misinformation, and that's the last bit that I want to get into here in the last 10 minutes of the show. Unfortunately, we're not going to do any other segment. I'm not even going to do a climax. We're just going to, we're going to finish off the whole Vault 7 thing. And here, I'll just say it point blank, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the episode. I don't trust WikiLeaks anymore. Not for anything. I personally, and it would take me longer than the 10 minutes I have left to really lay out a lot of the evidence that I have, that I think WikiLeaks is completely compromised by whatever alphabet soup organization. Maybe it's the CIA themselves, or maybe it's the NSA. Maybe this is part of that whole competition where the NSA now controls WikiLeaks, and they're like, well, we're going to make since we have this kind of turf war going on with the CIA, we're going to make them look like shit by releasing all of these documents about them. Is that, is that what's going on here? Maybe. But my personal opinion is, and you just, go back to July of last year, right? Remember when WikiLeaks, they did all that big huffing and puffing, beating their chests and everything, saying that, oh yeah, we're going to release this, really damning evidence on what's happening in Turkey and everything. And what they ended up releasing was a bunch of, like private information about just, Turkish citizens that are, totally innocent people, that so much of their data, really, data that could be used against somebody to really do harm, got released by WikiLeaks. It was a sham. Like, it was a terrible, terrible fucking release. That was one of the, not the first thing, but that was one of the initial things where I was like, that whole situation, like, you guys really botched that up. That there was no need. You released a bunch of crap and you harmed a lot of people that didn't need to be harmed. Because most of the data that went out there, because some people have been saying that about WikiLeaks for a while, that like, they're releasing, this military data, and so they're, potentially affecting agents on the field and, and all of this other stuff. The release from the Turkish databases, most of that had nothing to do with that at all, if any. And that was an ugly bit of business. Okay, now, there are people who, now we're getting into some speculation conspiracy territory, there are people who think that Julian Assange hasn't even been alive, at least for the past few months, that he is long dead. Well, that's an interesting story that requires a lot more time to cover. But I'm just going to put out a maybe. But all I'm really going to say, there's been things done recently that apparently prove he's alive, and he's done, well, anyway, we're not going to get into that because that requires covering a whole bunch of other crap. Okay, but what I want to say is that WikiLeaks themselves, yeah, I really think they're compromised. I think a lot of what they were doing during the election really seemed like they were trying, they almost felt like controlled opposition with a lot of the stuff that they were, releasing and everything. And in fact, what's also interesting, and this is a point I didn't even get into that also got covered by Vault 7, is that the CIA will fake who exactly looks, they'll fake who's doing the attacking. Like a lot of these, exploits that they take advantage of on devices, they can make it look like it was the Russians, even though it was potentially the CIA. Now, that gets into, that's a much longer conversation, okay? But it's interesting, that sort of thing was happening. And in fact, I have no reason actually really to doubt that it wasn't really the Russians, that it was the CIA that could have been doing, a lot of this. But WikiLeaks was, in my opinion, kind of part of really controlling that Russian narrative because, with what they were doing against the DNC, the email hacks and all this different stuff. Something's not right about that. And maybe the most damning aspect of it is that, again, the way that they were releasing just the Vault 7 information, the year zero information, they were totally practicing FUD. There was no reason to say that Signal was cracked because it wasn't, or WhatsApp, at least not for the reasons that they gave as far as WhatsApp goes, or any of these other things. All right, they straight up were lying, and that's a problem. And to make it worse, like I said, most of or a lot of, not all, like I said, there's a register, there's some others that were, thankfully doing some due diligence. Even the New York Times came out with a great story saying, look, that WikiLeaks, we don't know what they're doing, but they are not, the documents themselves are completely authentic, but what WikiLeaks is saying and some of their conclusions are bullshit. And it's true, they're bullshit. So I really don't trust WikiLeaks. Now, if, let's say, that WikiLeaks is controlled by CIA or NSA, I'm going to run off the theory, and again, we're going into speculation realm here for much of this. Okay, I am going to say, that perhaps they are run by the CIA. I mean, some people talk about that anonymous hasn't been anonymous forever, that that's also, something that's controlled by whatever intelligence agency. But I'm not going to go into that. So as far as why I think this happened, now the thing that you find out from the Vault 7 release is that the CIA lost control of all of these tools that were announced. And that's where I think the reality lies as to why this even got released. I think that the CIA absolutely let this go out. The WikiLeaks was their venue. Now, maybe it wasn't WikiLeaks compromised. Personally, just based upon the way that WikiLeaks announced a lot of this and reported on a lot of this, that lends me to think that they're compromised. I think that it shows really that the CIA needed the private sector's help in solving all, in closing up all these exploits, closing up all these gaps, plugging all these holes. That's my opinion of why this information even got out. Is because the CIA doesn't, just like they don't have the manpower to exploit everybody on the fucking planet, I don't think they have the manpower or the brains even, especially based upon, like I said, a lot of this stuff, some of it's a little clever, but a lot of it's so rudimentary, it's so basic. They're really not dealing with the best people in the world. And obviously, a great hacker can make great money going and working for Kevin Mitnick rather than working for the government. Okay. So the incentive is really to work within the private sector or even black markets or something like this. And I say black markets with respect, not as a derogatory term. So in my opinion, the CIA couldn't handle, and they're scared to death of the tools that have been released. And so they put it out there as a leak, and they did it in a way that makes it seem like they're kind of the bad guys and that the public is going to get in a little bit of an uproar, and they want all of these companies, hey, Apple, hey, Google, hey, Chrysler, hey, whoever, you need to start fixing this shit right away, or we're in some, really big trouble. Okay. And honestly, I think even the attacks by WikiLeaks themselves, the verbal attacks on Signal and encrypted chat apps, I think that was all part of the scheme as well to get people away from using those. Because as we know, ever since Donald Trump, became president-elect and then president, the use of Signal has gone up hundreds of percent, at least 400%, if not significantly more. So the timing of this is a little too perfect. It's a little too perfect, and also the content that got out there, that was put out there, it all seems so controlled. And it takes a lot. I mean, you really, I get it. You got to kind of big picture a lot of this stuff. Okay. But that's really how it feels, is that this was not actually a leak. This was like a controlled dissemination of information with a very specific purpose, be it FUD, be it to incite people to have better practices, or to incite, various tech companies or whatever else to shape up their game and to start plugging all these holes in their systems and whatever. I mean, it really does feel controlled. This does not feel like something like WikiLeaks is coming out as some kind of grand hero, because honestly, their leaks in the past, in recent years anyway. I'm not saying there wasn't a point where WikiLeaks was a good organization, but right now, in the past year, maybe two, whatever, maybe even more, I am so skeptical of them. I really, really am. I wouldn't trust them for anything. I wouldn't turn my back on them. I wouldn't. I mean, like, you know what I mean by that? Like I wouldn't turn away. I'm not saying I don't want to stick with them. I'm saying I don't want to stick with them. Okay, I would not trust them for anything. So consider, in my opinion, the Golden Stallion's opinion, the end game for a lot of this. Okay, we talked about a lot of the solutions you can do, and a lot of some of it's easy, some of it's hard. Okay, but one thing I want you to walk away from this is that I would be incredibly skeptical of WikiLeaks and what they put out there, or at least why they put out there. I think that these documents are legit. I think they're real. Totally authentic. I think the CIA probably enacted much of what they discussed. In fact, it kind of says that they did, and that a lot of this was, or maybe some of it still is, or has been improved upon or evolved, is very possible. Okay. So I'm not questioning the entire thing. I'm just saying that the way that it was put out there, the way that it was presented, the way that it was, put upon the public, I think was a scheme by some agency itself. So anyway, that's enough Sovryn Tech this week. Holy hell. Not the most fun episode in the world, but we had a lot to cover. That is my breakdown. That is what I think is really going on. Maybe if we get more information about this, I will talk about it in future episodes of Sovryn Tech. If you have questions, of course, email me, bds@sovereigntech.com. And I do have a PGP key for that email address that you can use as well. Anyway, if you also want to donate to the show, please feel free. Just go to sovereigntech.com and you can find all of that. Woo! I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.